if we can't get the basics right of managing the water supply that we have here, how can we call ourselves a functioning country? And that's before we get into, she mentions, should we be, if you have a shower, should you be saving the water or taking the bath water out and using it to
this is grey
water
water,
the grass,
isn't it?
grey
To
water.
reuse
And
it.
yes, we should definitely be doing all of that, but we should also be building water infrastructure, and we can't.
Right, let's do a couple of minutes on Thames Water, warning 10.1 million customers that a hosepipe ban is likely to be in place until the end of the year. Neville Muncaster, Strategic Water Resources Director at Thames Water, was on Times Radio Breakfast.
This has been an exceptionally challenging summer. We've seen prolonged hot and dry weather since March, very low rainfall. In fact, we've seen about 40% of long-term average rainfall in that time. And all that means is put pressure on the groundwater, pressure on the rivers that feed particularly London in the region. And we've had to manage very carefully those resources to ensure we always have enough water.
Juliet Samuel writes in the Times today that while left and right bicker over state or private ownership, no one's paying attention and paying indeed to build desperately needed infrastructure. On this, Thames Water loses roughly 569 million litres every single day of water, and so it's becoming an age-old argument. But Terry, I think my sort of thinking on this is that this will be a defining part of Andy Burnham's time as Prime Minister, because it's infrastructures like water and water companies that he really wants to target and get them away from private companies and into government control.
Yes, and I think, this is the product of decades of having patched things up badly. I mean, Thames Water, particularly London's water system, is, it's basically a Victorian creation, and every so often when you see a water main burst open, you're looking at that kind of Victorian infrastructure that was built and hasn't really been properly modernised. But I think it was quite interesting what Andy Burnham was saying about this earlier this week in his interview with The Times, and he was talking very much about public control rather than public ownership, but he wasn't making the case in a kind of ideological way. He was saying this is a pragmatic thing. He was arguing that it is better to have these companies, they will be run more cheaply, they will be run more efficiently, they will be able to do more in terms of infrastructure if they have this kind of public guidance without necessarily being completely publicly owned. So I think it's an interesting argument, whether it's actually right, whether the government has the correct levers to make companies behave differently, because the National Audit Office says that the regulator hasn't pointed these companies towards investment and infrastructure nearly enough over the last few years, and there's always this tension between how much money do you put into investing to rebuild things and how much do you the customers have to pay for that, essentially.
I paid my Thames Water bill today, in fact,
well
and
done.
it was significantly more expensive than I thought it was going to be, because they put their prices up. And that's without watering the garden that looks like a desert. But the other point of Juliet's article that really sort of enraged me was reminding me that we are a really damp island.
Yes.
Not the last month, okay, fine, but we get a lot of rainfall. The warnings of flash floods because of the rain that we're going to have in the next couple of days. We haven't built a reservoir since 1991. The reservoir they're trying to build in Oxford, they've been trying to build for 20 years, and it keeps getting blocked because people are worried that it's too big. Like, it's a lake. Who doesn't want to live near a big lake? If we can't get the basics right of managing the water supply that we have here, how can we call ourselves a functioning country? And that's before we get into, she mentions, should we be, if you have a shower, should you be saving the water or taking the bath water out and using it to
This is grey
water
water,
the grass,
isn't it?
grey
To
water.
reuse
And
it.
yes, we should definitely be doing all of that, but we should also be building water infrastructure, and we can't.
But the part of that article that I took issue with was Juliet Samuel was quoting Professor Dieter Helm, who's basically saying, well, you need to sort of settle for less slightly. You need to have a difference between drinking water and non-drinking water. And I thought, well, we've all travelled to countries, either recently or in the past, where you couldn't drink the water and you have to separately, either pay for or buy separate drinking water. And I think the idea, that we pay quite a lot of money for this. We are a developed country. I don't think we should have to be able to say it's on the individuals to sort out their system so that you can have good quality water. And he's saying that somehow that this could be done, on a almost household level. And I think, that is not a line that we should cross. I think we should be, yes, we can be using water more wisely and more thoughtfully and maybe recycling it. But the idea that we're somehow individually responsible for whether you get drinking water or not, I think is a bit too far.
We are here with Terry Stiasny, Times Radio's political correspondent, and Rachel Cunliffe from the New Statesman, the New Statesman's associate political editor.